The docking ring security team that found them was led by Captain Sarah Chun, a no-nonsense former military officer who ran her section of the ring, like a proper operation rather than the usual collection of bribes and favors that characterized most frontier stations. Jake had worked with her people before, and he trusted them to be fair even when dealing with complicated situations, which this definitely was. "Let me get this straight," Captain Chun said, reviewing the data on her tablet as they sat in the security office's main briefing room. "You destroyed a Vrex Consortium cargo hauler, injured 6 crew members, and stole what they're claiming is a billion-credit piece of exotic cargo. And you're telling me you did it because their cargo was actually a kidnapped sentient being?" "That's about the size of it," Jake confirmed. Chun looked across the table at Kethfer, who had remained silent during most of the debriefing. The War Guardian sat with perfect posture, his golden eyes alert and watchful. Despite the stress of their recent escape, he projected an aura of calm competence that seemed to fill the room. "And you are?" "I am Kethfer of the Third Circle," he replied formally. "Last War Guardian of the Veltar people? And I confirm everything that Jake Morrison has told you." Chun's expression didn't change, but Jake saw her grip tighten slightly on her tablet. Everyone in this sector had heard stories about the Veltar, though most people dismissed them as spacer legends. Ancient aliens with mysterious powers, guardians of galactic peace, warriors who could take on entire fleets single-handed. The kind of stories that grew larger with each telling, but looking at Kethfer, Jake was beginning to suspect that the stories weren't exaggerated at all. "Vrex is demanding your immediate return," Chun continued. "They've threatened to file charges with the Galactic Commerce Authority and have this entire docking ring declared a pirate haven if we don't comply. And what's your response to that?" Jake asked. Chun's smile was thin and predatory. "I told them to file their paperwork and wait in line like everyone else. I don't take orders from slavers, and I certainly don't hand over refugees to be sold in flesh markets." "Thank you," Kethfer said quietly. "Your integrity is noted and appreciated." "Don't thank me yet," Chun warned. "Vrex isn't going to take no for an answer. They've already hired a mercenary company to recover their property by force if necessary. Intelligence suggests they're planning to assault the docking ring within the next 12 hours. Jake felt his stomach drop. "How many?" "2 light cruisers and a assault transport. Probably 400 mercenaries, all of them well-armed and experienced. More firepower than my security teams can handle." The briefing room fell silent as the implications sank in. Jake had thought that escaping the cargo hauler would be the end of their troubles, but instead it looked like he'd just painted a target on everyone who'd helped them. The docking ring housed nearly 50,000 civilians, most of them independent traders and their families who had no part in this conflict. "There has to be another way," Jake said. "Some kind of legal process, or—" "Vrex operates outside legal processes when it suits them," Chun replied. "And they have enough political influence to make sure that any official complaints disappear into bureaucratic black holes. No, if we're going to stop this, we'll have to do it ourselves." Kethfer had been listening to the conversation with growing tension, and now he stood abruptly. "This is unacceptable. Innocent people should not suffer because of my freedom. I will return to Vrex custody." "Like hell you will," Jake said, rising to face him. "We didn't go through all that just to hand you back to them. Jake Morrison, you do not understand the forces you have set in motion. Vrex has connections throughout this sector, and they will not stop until they have reclaimed what they consider their property. How many lives is my freedom worth?" "All of them," Jake said without hesitation. "Because if we give in now, how many more will they enslave later? How many more sentient beings will disappear into their cargo holds?" Kethfer stared at him, and Jake felt that familiar pressure behind his eyes as the alien probed his thoughts. But this time Jake didn't resist. He let Kethfer see exactly what he was feeling. The anger at injustice. The determination to do what was right regardless of the cost. The simple, stubborn human refusal to back down when faced with bullies. "Interesting," Kethfer murmured. "You truly believe that? Damn right I do." Captain Chun cleared her throat. Much as I hate to interrupt this philosophical debate, we still have a practical problem. Even if every security officer on this ring stands and fights, we're outnumbered 10 to 1. Unless you've got a miracle up your sleeve, we're looking at a massacre. Kethver's expression grew thoughtful. Perhaps not a miracle, but something close to one. He turned to face a section of apparently empty wall. You may reveal yourselves now. I know you are there. Jake blinked in confusion, but Captain Chun immediately had her sidearm drawn and pointed at the wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air shimmered, and 3 figures materialized as if they'd simply stepped out of thin air. 2 of them were Veltar, similar to Kethver but with coloring and markings. The third was something else entirely, a tall humanoid figure in elaborate armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. All 3 carried themselves with the same aura of controlled power that Jake had come to associate with dangerous people. Kethver of the Third Circle, one of the Veltar said formally. We answer the call. How long have you been here? Kethver asked. We arrived shortly after your recognition signal propagated through the quantum communication network. The second Veltar replied, When a war guardian chooses a bond partner, all of our people know of it within hours. Jake felt his head spinning. Recognition signal? Bond partner? The armored figure removed its helmet, revealing features that were definitely not human. The being had silver blue skin and large dark eyes with delicate features that suggested grace and intelligence. When it spoke, its voice carried a melodic quality that was hauntingly beautiful. I am Zara of the Kethring Collective, it said. We have been allies of the Veltar for over 1,000 years. When we learned that a human had been chosen by a war guardian, we came to see this remarkable individual for ourselves. Chosen by a war guardian? Chun repeated slowly. What exactly does that mean? The first Veltar stepped forward. I am Thekmar of the First Circle. In our culture, the bond between a guardian and their chosen partner is sacred. It has not happened in over 2 centuries, and it has never happened with a member of your species. Why not? Jake asked. Because your people are too young, Thekmar explained. Too driven by personal ambition, too focused on material gain. We have observed humanity for decades, and while we found your species interesting, we did not believe any human possessed the qualities necessary for the bond. Until now, the second Veltar added, I am Savath of the Second Circle. Your actions have proven that humanity is capable of growth beyond our previous estimates. Zara nodded agreement. The Kethrin Collective has also been watching your species with interest. Your technological adaptability is impressive, and your capacity for individual heroism is noteworthy. But this is the first time we have seen a human choose moral courage over personal safety when faced with true consequences. Jake felt overwhelmed by the attention and praise. He'd freed one person from a cage, and somehow that simple act had attracted the notice of ancient alien civilizations. I still don't understand what any of this means. It means, Kethver said quietly, that you are no longer just Jake Morrison, human mechanic. You are Jake Morrison, bond partner to a war guardian, protected by the Veltar and honored by their allies. And more importantly, it means that when Vrex comes for us, they will not be facing a handful of station security guards. Captain Chun lowered her weapon, but her expression remained wary. How many ships do you have? The Veltar brought 2 dreadnoughts, Thekmar replied. The Kethrin contributed a heavy cruiser and 3 destroyers. We also have word that a Terran Alliance patrol group has been diverted to this sector. Terran Alliance? Jake's head was spinning faster now. How do they know what's happening here? Because, Zara said with something that might have been amusement, news of the first human to bond with a war guardian has spread throughout the galactic community faster than any of us expected. Your government is very interested in meeting you. My government thinks I'm a freelance mechanic working outer rim stations. Not anymore, Savath said. As of 6 hours ago, you became one of the most politically significant humans in the galaxy. Jake sat down heavily, trying to process everything he'd learned. A simple act of conscience had somehow escalated into interstellar politics, with multiple alien civilizations taking sides based on his actions. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd always avoided politics, preferring the straightforward honesty of broken machines over the complexity of broken systems. Jake, Kethver moved to stand beside his chair. I know this is overwhelming, but there is something else you must understand. The bond between us is not just ceremonial. It is a practical alliance that will affect the rest of your life. How? It means that wherever you go, whatever you choose to do, you will have the support of the Veltar. Our resources, our knowledge, our protection. But it also means that, the footsteps were getting closer. Jake could hear voices now, harsh and urgent, speaking in the guttural trade language that most of the sector's criminal organizations favored. They were conducting a systematic search, checking every compartment and storage bay methodically. How many crew members? Jake whispered. Kethver's ears twitched as he listened to sounds beyond Jake's range of hearing. 8 aboard the vessel. 4 armed with energy weapons, 2 with projectile arms. The captain carries a neural disruptor specifically designed for my species. Jake felt his stomach drop. A neural disruptor could incapacitate a telepathic being instantly, leaving them helpless and in agony. The fact that the captain carried one suggested that recapturing Kethver was a high priority, and that they were prepared for violent resistance. There's another way out of here, Jake said, thinking quickly. The maintenance shaft that leads to the engine compartment. It connects to the external hull access points, and then we improvise. Kethver's expression might have been a smile if his features had been human. I begin to understand why you freed me, Jake Morrison. Your species does not think like others. They moved quickly toward the far end of the storage bay, where Jake had spotted the maintenance access during his initial survey. The shaft was narrow, designed for emergency repairs rather than comfortable passage, but it would serve their purpose. Jake pulled the cover off and gestured for Kethver to go first. You are smaller, the alien pointed out logically. You're stronger, Jake countered. If we run into trouble up there, I'd rather have you in front. Kethver nodded and slipped into the shaft with fluid grace. Despite his size, he moved almost silently, his natural agility allowing him to navigate the cramped space with ease. Jake followed, replacing the cover behind them just as he heard voices entering the storage bay. The maintenance shaft was designed as a network connecting all of the ship's major systems. Jake had memorized the layout during his original inspection, a habit that had served him well over the years. They crawled through darkness toward the engine compartment, guided by the distant glow of monitoring panels and the steady thrum of the ship's power plant docked behind them. Jake could hear muffled shouts of discovery. The crew had found the empty containment unit and were not pleased about it. The voices grew more urgent, and Jake caught fragments of conversation that made his blood run cold. They weren't just angry about losing valuable cargo. They were afraid of something. What aren't you telling me about yourself? Jake whispered as they reached a junction in the shaft. Kethver paused, his golden eyes reflecting the dim light from a nearby panel. That is a complex question with a complex answer. What do you know of my species? Almost nothing. I'd never seen a Veltar before today. We are old, Kethver said quietly. Older than most species in this sector of the galaxy. We were among the first to achieve interstellar travel, and we have spent millennia exploring the cosmos. But we are also few in number. My entire species numbers less than 10,000 individuals. Jake did quick math in his head. For an interstellar civilization, 10,000 was barely a sustainable population. What happened to you? We chose a different path than most species. When we encountered other forms of life, we did not seek to conquer or control them. Instead, we became guardians, protectors. We dedicated ourselves to maintaining the balance between different civilizations. They reached another junction, and Jake gestured toward the right branch. As they crawled, he processed what Kethver had told him. You're some kind of galactic peacekeepers? In a manner of speaking, though our methods are perhaps more direct than that term implies. There was something in Kethver's tone that suggested hidden depths to that statement. But before Jake could ask for clarification, the alien suddenly stopped moving. His ears perked up, and Jake could see tension coiling through his frame. "What is it?" "They are cutting through the shaft covers," Kethver whispered. "They know where we are." Jake cursed under his breath. The crew must have scanning equipment capable of tracking life signs through the ship's hull. They'd be trapped in the maintenance shafts like rats in a maze, with no room to maneuver and nowhere to run. But as they reached the engine compartment access, Jake had an idea. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it might be their only chance. "Can you handle extreme acceleration?" he asked. "Define extreme." 10, maybe 12 gravities. Kethver's eyes widened slightly. "For how long?" "Long enough to reach the station's outer docking ring." "That is ... Kethver paused, calculating. "That is not possible in a cargo vessel of this size. The structural stress would tear the ship apart." "Not if I reroute power from the containment systems to the inertial dampers," Jake explained rapidly. "And if I override the safety protocols on the thruster assemblies. We'd have maybe 30 seconds before the engines burned out, but that should be enough." "Should be?" "I've never actually tried it before," Jake admitted. "But the math works out." Kethver stared at him for a long moment, and Jake had the distinct impression that the alien was reassessing everything he thought he knew about human engineering capabilities. "Your species is either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish, usually both at the same time." They dropped through the access panel into the engine compartment just as Jake heard cutting torches beginning to work on the shaft behind them. The engine room was a maze of conduits, power couplings, and thruster assemblies, all humming with barely contained energy. Jake moved among them with practiced ease, his hands flying over control panels and junction boxes. "What can I do to help?" Kethver asked. "Watch the door. Let me know if anyone gets through." Jake pulled up the ship's power distribution grid on his portable scanner, studying the energy flows with a critical eye. Cargo haulers like this one were designed for reliability and efficiency, not performance. But every ship had hidden potential. If you knew where to look for it, the containment systems were drawing massive amounts of power to maintain their various fields and barriers. Jake began rerouting that energy to the inertial dampers and structural integrity generators, bypassing safety protocols that were designed to prevent exactly this kind of modification. Warning lights began flashing throughout the engine compartment, and computer voices started announcing violations of safe operating procedures. "How long?" Kethver called from his position near the door. 2 minutes, Jake replied, his hands moving across control surfaces with mechanical precision. "Maybe 3. The sound of cutting torches was getting louder, and Jake could hear voices shouting instructions in several different languages. The crew was coordinating their search, blocking off escape routes, and moving systematically toward their position. But Jake had one advantage they probably hadn't considered. He was the only person on this ship who actually understood how its engines worked. The thruster assemblies were next. Jake pulled up their control interfaces and began overriding the built-in limitations that prevented them from operating beyond safe parameters. The changes he was making would destroy the engines within minutes, but they would also provide enough thrust to accelerate the entire ship at speeds that would crush any unprotected organic matter. "Jake," Kethver said urgently. "They are through the first barrier, almost done." Jake's fingers flew over the final series of modifications, linking the thruster controls to a single manual trigger. "Get over here and hang on to something solid." Kethver moved to Jake's side and gripped a support strut with both hands. His claws extended automatically, biting deep into the metal for additional security. "What about you?" Jake held up the manual trigger, a simple dead man switch that he'd rigged to the ship's primary controls. "I'll be hanging on to this." The engine compartment door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. 3 figures in Vrex security armor charged through the opening, weapons raised and scanning for targets. Jake caught a glimpse of the captain behind them, a tall figure in elaborate robes carrying what looked like a staff topped with pulsing crystals, the neural disruptor. If that thing hit Kethver, their escape attempt would be over before it began. "Surrender the cargo?" the captain called in accented standard. "Return our property and we will allow you to live." "Property?" Jake felt anger flare in his chest. "He's not property. He's a person." The captain laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the engine compartment walls. "Your species understands so little about the galaxy you have stumbled into. The Veltar are worth more than your entire world's annual income. This one especially. What makes him so special?" "He has not told you?" The captain's expression grew thoughtful. "Perhaps he does not trust you as much as you believe. This is Kethver of the Third Circle, last survivor of the Veltar War Guardians. His people have spent centuries protecting lesser species from threats they cannot even comprehend. And now he belongs to us." Jake glanced at Kethver, seeing something new in those golden eyes. Not shame, exactly, but perhaps regret that his true nature had been revealed in this way. A war guardian. That explained the barely contained power Jake had sensed from the moment the alien stepped out of his cage. "I don't care what he is," Jake said firmly. "He's still not property." The captain raised his neural disruptor, its crystals beginning to glow with malevolent energy. "Then you will die, Wit." Jake Morrison wiped grease from his hands with an old rag, squinting at the massive cargo hauler that dominated Bay 7 of Kepler Station. The ship looked like it had been through a plasma storm and lost badly. Scorch marks painted abstract patterns across its hull, and several thruster assemblies hung at awkward angles like broken bones. "Another rush job," Jake muttered to himself. The station's mechanic bay never seemed to catch a break. Ships came and went at all hours, most of them pushing their engines past safe limits to meet tight delivery schedules. But this one was different. The registration code marked it as belonging to Vrex Shipping Consortium, and everyone knew what that meant. Vrex didn't just transport cargo. They transported things that other companies wouldn't touch, often using methods that skirted the edge of galactic law. Jake had worked on their ships before, and he'd learned to keep his mouth shut and his eyes on the machinery. Vrex paid well, but they expected complete discretion. The airlock hissed open as Jake approached with his toolkit. He'd barely stepped inside when the smell hit him. It wasn't the usual mix of recycled air and engine coolant that filled most cargo vessels. This was something else entirely. Something organic and wrong. The ship's interior was dimmer than regulation standards allowed. Emergency lighting cast red shadows along the corridors, and Jake could hear the hum of overtaxed environmental systems struggling to maintain basic life support. He followed the main passage toward the engine compartment, his footsteps echoing in the artificial quiet. That's when he heard it. A low, rhythmic sound that made the hair on his arms stand up. It was too regular to be mechanical, too deep to be human. Jake paused, tilting his head to listen more carefully. The sound was coming from somewhere off the main corridor, behind what looked like a storage bay door. Jake's training told him to ignore it. He was here to fix engines, not explore cargo holds. But something about that sound pulled at him, demanding attention in a way he couldn't ignore. After a moment's hesitation, he pressed the door control. The storage bay was larger than he'd expected, stretching deep into the ship's belly. Rows of containment units lined the walls, most of them dark and silent. But one unit in the far corner glowed with harsh white light, and from it came that same low, pulsing sound. Jake approached slowly, his toolkit forgotten in his nervousness. The containment unit was twice the size of a standard cargo pod, its transparent walls revealing what lay inside. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The creature was magnificent and terrible at the same time. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body covered in midnight black fur marked with silver stripes that seemed to shift in the light. Its face was distinctly feline, but larger and more intelligent than any cat Jake had ever seen. Powerful muscles rippled beneath its coat as it paced within the cramped confines of its prison, but it was the eyes that held Jake frozen. They were deep gold, flecked with green, and filled with an intelligence that was unmistakably aware. This wasn't some mindless beast. This was a sentient being, trapped and caged like an animal. The creature noticed Jake's approach and stopped its pacing. Those golden eyes fixed on him, and Jake felt a chill run down his spine. There was no rage in that gaze, no wild fury. Instead, He saw something far more disturbing: resignation, acceptance, the look of someone who had given up hope. Jake circled the containment unit, studying its construction. The walls were made of reinforced transparent aluminum, strong enough to contain something with considerable strength. Energy inhibitors hummed along the base, designed to prevent any creature inside from using natural electromagnetic abilities. Most telling of all were the neural dampeners built into the ceiling. They were broadcasting a low-level psychic suppression field, the kind used to keep telepathic species docile. This wasn't a cargo transport. This was a prison designed for a very specific type of prisoner. Jake's hands moved to the unit's control panel almost without conscious thought. His fingers traced the locking mechanisms, identifying the security protocols and power routing. Years of working with complex machinery had given him an intuitive understanding of how systems functioned, and this one was no different from any other containment system he'd encountered. The creature watched him work, its head tilted in what might have been curiosity. Jake caught himself looking into those eyes again and had to force himself to focus on the controls. There were too many questions he couldn't answer. Who was this being? Why was it here? What would happen if he freed it? But Jake found that the questions didn't matter as much as the simple fact of the imprisonment itself. He'd seen enough of the galaxy to know that sentient beings deserved better than cages, regardless of their species or origin. And something in those golden eyes told him that this creature meant no harm to anyone. Who didn't mean harm to at first. The control panel security codes were more sophisticated than Jake had expected, but not sophisticated enough. His modified scanner broke through the encryptions after only a few minutes, revealing the system's core programming. Jake's fingers moved across the interface, bypassing safety protocols and disabling the containment fields one by one. The neural dampeners shut down first, their constant hum fading to silence. The creature's ears perked up immediately, and Jake saw a flash of something like surprise cross its features. Next came the energy inhibitors, their power readings dropping to 0. Finally, Jake reached for the lock release. He paused with his finger hovering over the control. Once he pressed it, there would be no going back. Vrex Shipping wouldn't take kindly to having their cargo liberated, and Jake had no idea what kind of consequences he might face. But looking at the creature again, seeing the hope that had kindled in those golden eyes, Jake knew he couldn't walk away. The lock disengaged with a soft click, and the containment unit's door slid open. The creature stepped out slowly, as if testing the reality of its freedom. It was even more impressive outside the confines of the cage, its presence filling the storage bay with a kind of restrained power that made Jake's pulse quicken. The being stretched, working out the stiffness of long confinement, and Jake caught a glimpse of retractable claws that could probably tear through steel plating. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the space of the storage bay. Jake found himself holding his breath, uncertain what to expect. The creature could probably kill him without breaking a sweat, but something told him that violence was the furthest thing from its mind. Instead, the being spoke. Its voice was deep and resonant, with an accent Jake didn't recognize. "You have freed me from my cage, human." "Why?" The question caught Jake off guard. He'd expected gratitude, perhaps, or even suspicion. But the creature's tone was genuinely curious, as if the concept of helping a stranger was foreign to its experience. "Because you don't belong in there," Jake said simply. "Nobody does?" Those golden eyes studied him for a long moment, and Jake had the uncomfortable feeling that he was being evaluated in ways he couldn't understand. When the creature finally nodded, it felt like some kind of test had been passed. "I am called Kethver," the being said formally. "I am of the species you humans call the Veltar, and I'm in your debt, Jake Morrison." Jake blinked in surprise. "How do you know my name?" "Your thoughts are loud when you work," Kethver replied with what might have been amusement. "And you have an honest mind." "It has been many cycles since I encountered such a thing." "Telepathic," Jake said, understanding. That explained the neural dampeners. "Someone was keeping you from reading minds?" "Among other things." Kethver's expression darkened. "The Vrex Consortium has methods for containing my kind that go beyond simple physical barriers. They have had much practice, Jake felt a chill at the implications. There are others? Were others, Kethver corrected, and his voice carried a weight of grief that made Jake's chest tighten. I am the last of my hunting pack, the only survivor of my ship's capture. The storage bay fell silent except for the distant hum of the ship's engines. Jake found himself thinking about the other containment units he'd seen, all dark and empty now. He didn't want to ask what had happened to their former occupants. Where were they taking you? Jake asked instead. To the flesh markets of Kepler 7, Kethver replied matter-of-factly. My species is considered a delicacy in certain circles. Our psychic abilities are also valued by those who collect exotic servants. Jake felt his stomach turn. He'd heard rumors about the flesh markets, whispered stories that most people dismissed as spacer legends. But looking at Kethver, seeing the controlled rage that flickered behind those golden eyes, Jake knew the stories were true. We need to get you off this ship, Jake said, his mind already racing through possibilities. Vrex will be back soon, and when they find that containment unit empty ... They will hunt me, Kethver agreed. But that is a problem for another moment. First, I must ask something of you, Jake Morrison. What? Kethver's expression grew serious, and Jake felt a strange pressure building behind his eyes, as if something was trying to push its way into his thoughts. Allow me to see your true self. Allow me to know if my debt is owed to one who is worthy of it. Jake didn't fully understand what the alien meant, but something in Kethver's tone suggested this was important beyond simple curiosity. After a moment's hesitation, Jack,